Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again. In this video I'm going to get off my typical set of topics and dip my toe into the contrived stock video space to cover an issue I've been following passionately for about 15 years now, California high-speed rail. California high-speed rail is an initiative by the state of California to attempt to build the first true high-speed passenger rail line in the United States. High-speed rail in California has been an idea thrown around for a long time, way back to when Jerry Brown and his suede denim secret police had plans for your uncool niece. But those ideas took real form in 2008 with the passage of Proposition 1A. Prop 1A laid out the framework for the California high-speed rail system and got the ball rolling with a $9 billion bond meant to fund the study, planning, and initial construction. California high-speed rail is governed by the California High-Speed Rail Authority, which is overseen by the state legislature. The heart of the California High-Speed Rail Initiative is Phase 1. This is a 500-mile segment running from San Francisco through San Jose, the Central Valley, the High Desert, Los Angeles, and ending in Anaheim. Now, the whole idea here is that this project is going to be a mass transit spine up the middle of the state between the Bay Area and the LA metro area, which combined comprise about 25 million people out of California's roughly 40 million population. From a high-speed rail perspective, this sounds like a great idea. 500 miles is a touch beyond high-speed rail's wheelhouse of 250 to 400 miles, but not terribly so. California high-speed rail is supposed to compete with air traffic between the two major metro areas, alleviating pressure on those air lanes. That should push back any need to further extend capacity at various airports in those areas, which could prove quite costly. And it should also pull cars off the road because people actually do drive the 7 hours or so between the two areas. I've done it myself several times. So air traffic wins, car traffic wins, and we get a less than 3 hours Los Angeles to San Francisco ride on an alternative mode of travel. Sounds very attractive, and all of these reasons are why I voted for it and I still support it. There have been many changes to the best way to start and build Phase 1, but what we're headed toward now is completion of a working segment from Merced to Bakersfield. If you're not from California, you likely have no idea where Merced and Bakersfield are. Hell, if you are from California, you might not know. Needless to say, neither are all that close to Los Angeles or San Francisco, and neither are on a direct path between the two. There are various reasons the project started there. It's the easiest place to start. It's the cheapest place to start. Some money from the federal government incentivized it. The train was going to travel through that area no matter what because Central Valley cities are expressly mentioned in Prop 1A, so it's not like it makes no sense whatsoever. They had to start somewhere, and starting at either end could have been very expensive and a political minefield as the various halves of the state don't play together particularly well. That Merced to Bakersfield portion is known as the interim operating segment, of which the Central Valley segment currently being constructed is a part. In addition to the Central Valley segment, some funds have also gone to upgrading and electrifying the Caltrain right-of-way in the Bay Area between San Francisco and San Jose. Going back to the political divides in the state, politicians in Southern California saw all this money flowing to the Central Valley and Bay Area, so they pushed for a major upgrade to LA Union Station to support California High-Speed Rail's LA Basin portion, in addition to some regionally important interchange upgrades. I've talked about Phase 1 and have mentioned the Central Valley segment, but I'd like to break this project up into its main subparts because that will be the crux of a point I'm going to make in my next video, where I try to convince everyone that the current way of doing things poses a real danger to the completion of this project. But I digress. The authority breaks the project up a little differently, but since this is my video, I'm going to take some license. The main parts of Phase 1 from north to south are as follows. Silicon Valley. This is the portion of Phase 1 from San Francisco to Gilroy. This is about an 85-mile segment, a good portion of which runs through already built up and built-in areas. There is an existing rail corridor there, and it is utilized by Caltrain, which is a regional passenger commuter rail line. Caltrain has been planning to upgrade and electrify its corridor down to Gilroy for quite some time. So in nearly overly simple terms, California High-Speed Rail slipped them a few bucks and said, how about putting your foot on the gas and keeping our needs in mind while you're at it? Of course, it's not that simple, and there will be additional work to the tune of several billion more dollars to get California high-speed rail trains running in this corridor. Well, COVID had other plans, but the basic idea still remains for Caltrain to do some legwork on that segment, and when California High-Speed Rail has the funds and is able to connect that line to the work being done in the Central Valley, there will be the additional necessary upgrades, but voila, you'll have Central Valley to Silicon Valley service. This is where the California High-Speed Rail money that has gone to the Bay Area so far is being spent, albeit only from San Francisco to San Jose for now. The big issue with this segment is that California High-Speed Rail won't be deviating much from the existing route and will not really be grade separating much of anything. The plan is to handle intersections with quad gates and a 110 mph speed limit, which could be lower in places depending on various factors. This is not super fast, but it's cheaper. This has been a long running theme with the authority because they're under the gun about the ballooning cost of the project, but can theoretically shift speed limits around and still make the required times between the various stations in the parts of the system that will get built later. California High-Speed Rail will be connecting to existing transit in the region, including BART and San Francisco International Airport at Millbrae. It will hook up with several regional rail and bus lines at Diridon in San Jose. The planned BART extension down there will also be done by the time California High-Speed Rail is operating there. And then lastly, California High-Speed Rail is expected to eventually terminate at the regionally connected Salesforce Transit Center in downtown San Francisco once tunneling is completed to there from the existing rail station at 4th and King. Silicon Valley to Central Valley Connector. This segment will run from Gilroy through about 14 miles of tunnels under the coastal range at the Pacheco Pass. It will then cross the Central Valley and meet up with the Central Valley segment at the Central Valley Y. The Central Valley Y is a high-speed T intersection. West on the T will lead to Gilroy, San Jose, San Francisco. North on the T will lead to Merced and possibly eventually Sacramento. South on the T will lead to Fresno, Bakersfield, and ultimately the LA Basin, hopefully. Because this segment includes many miles of tunnels, it poses some technical and funding challenges. In addition, this is one of the places the California High-Speed Rail Authority plans to make up some of the time it will lose by running at 110 miles per hour through Silicon Valley. The current plan is to run through the tunnels under Pacheco Pass at 220 miles per hour, which is unusually fast for high-speed rail in a tunnel. For various engineering reasons, running trains very quickly through tunnels means that the tunnels need to be built in a larger diameter. And of course, larger diameter tunnels will be more expensive to bore and construct. This is a major factor in the cost of California high-speed rail, more than doubling in the past 10 years. It also places unattractive price tags on the sections with a lot of tunneling, which just so happen to act as connectors between the three main regions of the project. Construction on this section should begin when Merced to Bakersfield is complete or sufficient funds are identified, whichever comes first. As there are currently no funds identified for this section beyond the Caltrain subsidy, the only guidance we have to go by currently is the 12/31/30 hard target or 2030 to 2033 range for completion of Merced to Bakersfield. The authority is also aiming to ask the state legislature to extend cap and trade funding flowing to the project through 2050 because those funds are currently set to expire in 2030. There is very little hope of anything outside of Caltrain occurring before Merced and Bakersfield is completed beyond planning, and even that is up in the air. Central Valley. This is where the large majority of the action on the project has taken place so far. It is broken up into two subsections, the initial 119-mile Central Valley segment and the extensions from that part to both Merced and Bakersfield, when combined forming the interim operating segment. Why is it broken up, you ask? The shifting sands of politics and various changes over the last 14 years, my boy. It's good enough to know that's where things stand now, and that is what will probably get built. The initial 119-mile segment is a fair amount behind schedule and quite a bit over budget, but it is being built and construction on that portion is set to be done in 2026. The extensions have not been started. The plan by the California High-Speed Rail Authority is for passenger service to be operating between Merced and Bakersfield by the end of 2030. That is the interim operating segment. I would rate this as optimistic, but not impossible. As long as they have adequate funding, I think this goal is a certainty in a time frame not far into the 2030s, although this is now in doubt because there is a $8 to $10 billion funding shortfall on this segment. That said, what may eventually be in service will be the easiest and cheapest segment to build, and it will only service areas comprising about 5% of California's population, none of which will be in the two major metro areas the project is aimed at. As a result, it is merely a start, and it is certainly not guaranteed. However, the Merced to Bakersfield portion represents a sizable amount of the true high-speed 220 mile/hour part of Phase 1. California High-Speed Rail will also connect to a regionally important transit hub in Merced and will meet numerous regional rail and bus lines there. On the flip side, this section contains the King's Tulare station, which is being constructed in a field 3 miles from Hanford. Hanford has a suburban rural population of a whopping 55,000 people and will surely be one of the least used stations in the system. Central Valley to High Desert. This segment runs from Bakersfield to the desert community of Palmdale, likely another head scratcher for most people, but Palmdale and its neighbor Lancaster make up a significant commuter population that have found themselves in the desert due to housing cost pressures, among other factors. The name High Desert is not fantasy. These communities lie at an elevation between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. This is a big elevation change from Bakersfield, which means crossing mountains, as well as major seismic faults and also lots of tunneling due to necessary grade limitations combined with the terrain. As a result, even though this segment will only connect about 1 million people, there probably isn't a ton of final destination traffic between the two areas, and this will be one of the most expensive segments at roughly $20 billion. High Desert to San Fernando Valley. This segment is a bit like Bakersfield to Palmdale in reverse. It will start at higher elevation in the desert and have to come back down to the San Fernando Valley, eventually ending up at Hollywood Burbank Airport in Burbank. In addition to the challenge of the elevation change, the route in this section traverses a portion of national forest, which will require tunneling. The route also runs across earthquake faults and some tricky seismic influenced terrain. As a result, this section may be the most technically challenging, because it will also feature many miles of tunnels, including one 13-mile tunnel and one 14 miles long. This section will be the most expensive to build. Many times we hear in California high-speed rail propaganda about Bakersfield or Fresno becoming a commuter paradise. However, the Palmdale-Lancaster area is already a commuter town, and California high-speed rail promises a very quick route to downtown LA compared to alternatives, roughly 30 minutes in this case compared to existing rail service that takes around 2 hours. I think if the commuter paradise is going to happen anywhere, Palmdale, Lancaster, and Gilroy Hollister are your more likely candidates, not Bakersfield or Fresno. But both would be quicker to population centers than car travel with high-speed rail, and both have plenty of available land. Another important factor in the Palmdale section story is that this is where a proposed connection to the upcoming Brightline West high-speed rail line from Las Vegas to Southern California could end up. Right now the plan is for Brightline West to terminate in Hesperia, which is a desert city about 50 miles east of Palmdale and 30 plus miles north of the more populated areas of Southern California on the other side of the Traverse Ranges. Brightline is currently making plans to run that line down the Cajon Pass to meet up with Metrolink service in Rancho Cucamonga, bypassing the need for Palmdale. Brightline says that construction should be done on the initial segment of the line from Hesperia to Vegas in 2026. To me, the Rancho Cucamonga plan signals Brightline's lack of confidence in California high-speed rail at Palmdale happening anytime soon. The advantage of Brightline West hooking up with California high-speed rail in Palmdale is that you'd be potentially looking at a single train ride all the way from downtown LA to Las Vegas, which has definite advantages for a large population segment over taking Metrolink to or driving to Rancho Cucamonga about 40 miles east of Los Angeles. And Brightline West is a high-speed rail line that will make increasing sense. Road traffic between the areas, despite being a 220-mile-plus journey, has been the travel mode of choice for as long as Las Vegas has been a destination. Part of that is because traditionally the fast lane of Interstate 15 in the desert areas would run at 90 to 100 miles per hour, and you could reasonably get between Southern California and Vegas by car in about 3 hours. However, increasing traffic is now taking its toll, even with the continued expansion of I-15, and pretty much everyone that has been to Vegas more than once in the last 10 years has a horror story about being stuck in stop-and-go traffic in the middle of the desert, 100 miles from civilization. Burbank to downtown Los Angeles. This is a short and pretty straightforward section. It runs through an area already totally built out. It's going to run at grade nearly the whole way. It's going to face the same issues as the San Francisco to Gilroy portion, where that means it likely won't exceed 110 miles per hour and may be limited to even slower speeds in places. By the authority's own estimates, a ride between these two stations will average 60 miles per hour. To me, that sounds like a 79 mile per hour speed limit, but I could be wrong. Within this segment, we can also include LA Union Station, which will be receiving major improvements, including a through line to the south over US 101 where none currently exists. This is because LA Union Station is currently configured as a terminus only. These improvements are happening as part of the Bookend work and help to balance out the money the Bay Area is receiving to improve the Caltrain right away. The big advantage of this section is that it connects to the LA Metro system at Union Station. By the time California High-Speed Rail gets there, the C-Line extension to LAX will be complete and the California High-Speed Station in Burbank will be at Hollywood Burbank Airport, so California High-Speed Rail will be fully connected to intercity, regional, and international transit, much like the transit connectivity that will be in place in the Bay Area. Downtown LA to Anaheim. This is a 31-mile segment with 2 optional in-between stations. With the optional stations, it conceptually does not look like high-speed rail. It probably won't run like high-speed rail and probably won't perform like high-speed rail. However, the final configuration is still up in the air. It will run in the Losan corridor, which currently carries freight, so the ever-present danger of a 79 mile per hour speed limit looms. 110 miles per hour seems more likely. The authority is planning to average 90 miles per hour on this section. The whole line runs through nothing but suburbs and warehouses and is basically the antithesis of what you would expect to service with high-speed rail, but like many places in overall Phase 1, it is as much a political move as a practical one. However, this does connect downtown LA to Orange County, including Anaheim Stadium, Honda Center, and other nearby venues, as well as sorta connecting to Disneyland, which would be a few miles from the nearest station. This is not the line that would theoretically eventually reach San Diego. If that is ever built, it will travel west from LA Union Station through at least a portion of the Inland Empire area and its 4.5 million inhabitants before heading south on a more inland route to San Diego. This line will instead terminate as a stub at the Arctic Regional Transit Hub and connect to regional rail and bus lines there. Since I've mentioned San Diego, let me briefly touch on Phase 2. Phase 2 is a concept wherein Phase 1 is extended from Merced to Sacramento in the Central Valley and from LA Union Station to San Diego. There is no funding, there is no plan, there isn't even a plan to do the environmental impact reports. It exists conceptually on paper, and that's about it. At the pace Phase 1 is going, I would not invite anyone over 40 years old to hold their breath on the Phase 2 portion happening within their lifetime. By the time this thing would be finished, we'll probably all be commuting through haptic pods or flying around in tubes like in the Jetsons, assuming Skynet hasn't wiped us out yet. So the California High-Speed Rail Authority is more or less committed to building this project piecemeal, and unless $50 billion drops out of the sky, they don't have much choice. The first portion done will be Merced to Bakersfield, and that might be running in the early 2030s. The funds that California High-Speed Rail currently has available, the Prop 1A bond, a few billion from the federal government, and California state cap and trade funds through 2030 will be exhausted building Merced to Bakersfield and the Bookend work discussed earlier. In addition, there is an $8 to $10 billion funding shortfall that will need to be rectified in the next few years to keep things from being further delayed. That creates a situation in the early 2030s where about 350 miles of Phase 1 will be left at an expense of $75 billion or more. And that is just the beginning of that nightmare. In the next video, I will explain why I think this piecemeal approach poses a real threat to Phase 1 of California high-speed rail ever connecting Los Angeles and San Francisco. If you have any questions or opinions about California high-speed rail, please leave them in the comments, but that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big, beautiful freeway.